Hello Joe, welcome to another pixel art tutorial. Yes, we are taking a break from development to do some pixel art. I've done one of these videos in the past and I would like to start doing more of them in the future. So here is episode number 2, designing a box. Now you might be thinking, Alex, why are we designing a box? That is very easy, not exciting at all. Why would I watch this video? Well, boxes are very simple, but I liked starting out with them because they allow us to introduce 3 important concepts: lighting, depth, and perspective, and how we can take a simple design and add just a few new details to it to really bring out like a new level of polish to our box that we're designing. So while it sounds simple, we're going to be learning a few very important concepts that we will carry over into future tutorials. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and draw my box shape. Now this is very simple, just a square, and let's give it a color brown. Okay, so this is great. Let's go ahead and introduce our first topic today of lighting. Now, the way I like to think of lighting when I first started out was, hey, I'm gonna draw a little sun up here in the top corner. This is the direction that my light is coming from. And so let's go ahead and draw everything with that in mind. So I'm gonna come here, grab a lighter color. Well, if this side is facing the sun, then this side is gonna naturally be lighter. And if this side is away from the sun, then this side is naturally going to be darker. And this makes sense. This is a great place to start, and there's nothing wrong with this, but it is very simplistic. And there are times that I still use this depending on the perspective that I'm trying to portray of the box, but we can add a few new details into this to really kind of bring this box a little more alive, make it feel a little more physical and part of the world. So let's go ahead and I'm going to save this frame and we're just going to come to a new one, and let's go ahead and wipe this. So the next thing we might think of is, okay, well, it's a crate, it's a box. Let's go ahead and give it a lip. And this is pretty common for a lot of crates. You know, they have this kind of inner rectangle or inner square indicating like a new layer of depth. However, using a black line for this is generally a bad idea because it looks very amateurish, and I like to try to use black lines only on the outside. So how do we portray this effect on the inside without using a black line? Well, let's come grab our light and our dark brown colors here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and create a quick palette just so I have colors to choose from and don't have to keep kind of coming back to our previous frames. So how do we turn this black amateur looking rectangle square inside of a square and make it look a little bit nicer? Well, we have our colors here, so we're thinking the same mindset we had in the last one. The sun is coming from over here, so let's go ahead and add a a light color here and a dark color on this side. And again, this looks okay. It's not too bad, but this actually is starting to jump into our next topic of perspective. If we look at this, it looks like this inner part is closer to us than this outer part. And the reason this is because this edge picking up sunlight means that it's further away from the box and getting sunlight when the rest of it isn't. So it kind of makes it look like it's further out, it's more accessible, it's getting more sunlight. So if we want to make it look recessed or pushed into the box, all we have to do is just flip these colors. And when we do this, we immediately gain a sense of depth to the box that this part here is actually on the inside, and we don't change the color of the box. I'm not coming in here and dumping this a dark color. Instead, we're letting the outlines of this do all of the perspective telling for us. So this is a great first step into designing a recessed box here. And sometimes I like to come through here, and since this is where the light and the dark and the light colors come to meet, they would meet at like more of a neutral color, which is our base color. So you can choose to kind of empty out those spaces if you would like. Now we could come in here again and we could do the same thing. We could put a outward box on the inside. Let's go ahead and actually make these the same dimensions. So now we could flip what we just did and do this here. And now we have a recessed box inside of a excess box. So again, here we can just repeat this indefinitely to get this trick as many different times as we want. Let's go ahead and remove these for now. Let's say we want to just kind of stick to our traditional idea of a crate. So let's go ahead and add kind of these cross beams that you might see. Okay, so we have a crossbar here. Now we have 2 different ways to color it, right? We can take this top one and make it dark and this bottom one light, or we can do light and dark. So let's go ahead and just see what both of those look like when I play around with those colors. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this and make this light and dark. Okay, so it looks like this whole crossbar itself is kind of pushed out away from the box. It has a little bit more of depth, like it's coming towards us. Now let's go ahead and flip that to see what it looks like. And now it kind of looks like a little bit the opposite. This one's actually kind of weird. I'm not really sure how the perspective comes off on this one. But as you can see, changing just the light and dark color applications to these edges really changes a lot of how this looks. And again, we could come here where the light and the dark edges meet. We can make these kind of neutral colors. But again, this does change a lot of the way that this looks. How does that look there? That's a little weird still. Maybe we can bring these together. So there's a lot of different ways that we can play around with this concept just by changing the edges from black to a darker or lighter color, and then alternating between whether or not those two colors are light or dark and which order that they come from. Now, the next thing we want to do is, let's say we want to add some more depth to this. So let's say you're making a platformer game and this was the box that you had in your platformer. Now this works and this is successful at portraying the idea of, hey, here's a box, but let's go ahead and make this a little more interesting and add some more depth to it without breaking the readability of what this object is. Now, a lot of times when people go to add depth onto an object, they will add it on top and kind of give it an isometric top-down perspective. Now, you don't need to do that in order to add depth, because what happens is when you add an extra top dimension, like a 2.5 dimension in, and your player can run on top, but it's kind of in between, you kind of start to lose some readability on where the player is allowed to move, what is interactable, what is behind, what is in front. So we're going to add more depth to this object, but we're not going to do it on top. We're going to add depth to the side. So essentially what we want to do is we want to think of taking this box like this and rotating it just a little bit, taking it and pivoting it on its center axis so that we start to see a little bit of the back side from the box as well as the front side, whereas right now we only see one side. So let's go ahead and take this. We're going to duplicate this frame here. Let's go ahead and color this all first, the same color. And I like to think of it as let's just split this box down this line right here. Now you can put the line wherever you want, but this idea is that now this is one face of the box here, and this is another face of the box here. So in order to achieve this effect, what's the first thing we can do? Well, we can give it lighting. This is a great way to, again, achieve this effect. So here's our base level color. That means if this is kind of turned away from us, another face, we can make this darker. And this looks okay now. But like I said before, I don't like using black lines in the middle of a sprite. So let's go ahead and get rid of this black line with just our dark color. Okay, cool. So this looks all right for now. So one thing I don't like is that this face has immediately become shorter. So I'm actually going to go ahead and extend this just a little bit just to make it look a little bit more similar to our original of how this was a big long front face. And this was, kind of, again, it's supposed to be a square box. So we don't want to totally distort the appearance of these faces. Now, obviously our box has become a little bit larger than our original one, but this is okay because we are introducing that new dimension here. Okay, so here is our box so far. I'm gonna go ahead and take a step away from this face right here, and I'm gonna work on just this face and do the same techniques we did in the previous frames, just on this face. So to totally break any sort of focus, I'm gonna make this some really absurd color so that we don't pay attention to it when we are designing it. Okay, that green is pretty gross. So let's go ahead and focus on this box. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use a combination of the two techniques that we worked on so far, and I'm basically going to combine this first frame with this second frame into this new box that we're working on in order to create this effect. So the first thing I'm going to do is this side is furthest away from the sun, so let's go ahead and make that dark. This side is closest to the sun. Let's go ahead and make that light. Let's go ahead and introduce a neutral color in between here. And now let's go ahead and do the same thing, but let's flip it a little bit. So I'm going to make this rim here dark, and I'm going to make this rim here light. And again, I'm going to introduce a neutral color to the centers. Okay, so now we have a nice little box looking here so far. Again, this is what we did previously, nothing too crazy. So let's go ahead and bring in our second side here. Let's dump it the color that we are decided that this side's going to be. And now we need to do basically the same thing, but the colors have changed. And if you notice, when we dumped this other side, we actually lost we lost this edge right here. So this edge right here, all the way through, we lost it as soon as we dump this because now it's the same color. So instead of dumping this color, the same color as our dark edge, let's actually make it just a little bit darker so that we still maintain some contrast between these two colors and it doesn't totally look like the same color. Okay, so now we have introduced a little bit of contrast there and we can start to do these same techniques on this side here. So I'm going to take an even darker color, and this is going to represent the edge that is away from the sun. And our lighter color, well, we don't want our lighter color to be the same as this because that might look kind of strange. I don't know how I feel about that. Yeah, so we don't want it to, we want our lighter color to still be darker than our darker color on our front face, just again, so we have that, you know, those different colors side by side, but we don't want it to be lighter than the darker color. So let's go ahead and take this as our dark color. Let's make it a little bit darker. Okay, let's use this as our new reference point. So I'm gonna go a little bit darker. That's gonna be our center, and a little bit darker is gonna be our edge. Okay, great. So we are starting to work with some dark colors. We can brighten all of this up a little bit later once we get done with it. But again, I'm going to introduce some neutral colors here into the corners. And now we are starting to create some perspective. So let's go ahead and do the same thing we did with our ledge here. Our edge here is we're going to introduce this as the side facing the sun. So it's going to be darker. And this is the side facing away from the sun. So it's going to be a little bit lighter. And again, neutral colors in the center. Again, that's up to you depending on how you want to do it. Okay, so here we have successfully created this cool looking box. It has a little bit of depth. These colors are a little harsh, so I think I'm going to try to find some more nicer blending colors that work a little bit better. One thing I do want to point out is it's interesting that we have this kind of lone pixel here as a kind of like a light point. So if we wanted to really kind of give this box like a little bit of extra character and a little bit of extra dimension, even though this should technically still be brighter, we can actually bring this into, we can bring one of these other colors over here, or we can even bring this color itself over here to make it seem like these edges aren't so disconnected, that there is something that they're sharing in between, or maybe like this is a little notch in the wood crate itself. However you want to think about it, but I think it helps bring the sides of the box together a little bit more. So let's go ahead and get our better tuned colors. So I'm going to start from the top, and I'm just going to take a real light color, and we're going to go through and recolor this whole box. All right, so we've successfully recolored the whole box. Again, there's still a lot of contrast. This is where I would recommend choosing a color palette, something that you like that has a bunch of different colors that work together. We'll be covering color palettes in a different video. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this video. We covered a couple topics of lighting, depth, and perspective. You can play with these concepts on anything. You can do it on non-square objects. You can do it on other inanimate objects. You can do it on characters. There's a lot of different ways you can implement this edge highlighting trick to really kind of give that sense of perspective, lighting, and depth. And then also consider rotating your objects just to make it a little more interesting and make it look a little more dynamic and have a little bit more depth to it when you are doing your objects inside of your pixel art game. I guess I can end this video by doing one other object in the same style that we just did, and just kind of speeding through it and not really talking a whole lot, but I'll just kind of speed through it just to show how I would do something similar. So let's go ahead and pick a table, because that is kind of similar to what we did in this video. It's very square-ish, and we can do it a couple different ways, a flat or rotate it, and I will do both here. So I can go ahead and make it the same heights, And here you can see that, you know, if we compare the two before and after, I think this one definitely looks a lot nicer. And if you saw it in a game, it would add a lot more depth to it. I did add one thing in here, a drawer, to kind of give it that pop of the perspective and dimension, like we did with the box, where we had, you know, kind of this recessed part of the box. And then when we also introduced the crate bar across, it adds a nice bit of diversity to it, so it's not just one solid color all the way through. If I were to go ahead and duplicate this frame, and just to get rid of it, just to kind of see what it would look like without it, we can see the differences side by side. So here you can see the table looks with and without the drawer. Now, depending on what you're going for in your game, the level of complexity, the level of detail, one of these might look cleaner and simpler for yours, but I do like the little drawer or little cubby or whatever it is inside of it a little bit more. I think that just adds an extra layer of depth to it. So anyway, guys, I know this was a pretty simple tutorial, or at least covering a very simple object to design. I know it probably wasn't the most exciting object to try to draw in pixel art, but we will be using these concepts for later art pieces going forward, and it is just kind of expected that you have these kind of basics and understanding of perspective and lighting when we go to design more complex objects in the future. So thank you guys so much for sticking by. If you like this and you want to see more pixel art videos, please let me know in the comments or shoot me a message on Twitter. It's always great to hear back from you guys and see what it is that you want. In the meantime, keep creating, keep drawing, keep designing, keep composing, and I will see you in the next video.